Welcome to Holistic Dose, your go-to podcast for big ideas distilled into microdose insights without all the BS. I'm Tiffany.
And I'm Jeanette.
I'm so excited about this episode, honestly, because here we're talking about making big changes. And, it's both exhilarating, but also terrifying. And we've been through a lot of those as friends throughout our years.
Yeah, I think we're really the perfect people to be talking about making big changes just because of everything we've been through in our own lives. And we're both in our 40s. We've both been divorced. We've both made lots of career changes.
Yeah.
I think a lot of women our age feel stuck and have a really hard time making those changes. And so it's something that I'm really looking forward to talking about today.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many areas in our life in which we can get stuck, right? So it's the career, it's our bodies, it's, with our friends and family, and there's just so many good moments here. So I think back to, our friendship, and it was formed when, our kids were like, my daughter was like 9 months old, and they met at daycare. And I was really drawn to you and formed a friendship because, like, the area we lived in, it was kind of, so it was East Cobb, and the area was coined as East Cobb snobs. It was so hard at that point finding friends that I could relate to, and that moms that felt like me, and we really hit it off and had so many great experiences through that.
Yeah, and I know that's something we're really wanting to achieve with our audience is being unfiltered, and that's something we really appreciated about each other was we were living in the East Cobb snob area
Yeah.
where there was so much filtering, so many messages about you need to be a certain way or think a certain way, and we just weren't like that,
Yeah.
and we are just comfortable being unfiltered, being authentic, and it just makes such a deeper connection with friendships, and we're wanting to really share that with others.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I always trust and love that you're my friend, that I know that when I like message you and I'm like, what do you think about this outfit? Immediately, you're not just going to say, oh, no, looks great, Tiffany, buy it. Like so many other people will. We are those unfiltered friends who will tell you like it is and be super honest. And we're willing to have those tough conversations that so many people are not. So we really hope that we can offer this to other people in their lives too, that feel like they're in their 40s and they've been through a lot of big things, and or maybe they're about to be going through some big things, but we're here for people, and we hope we can spread that.
Yeah, absolutely. So my job, as you know, Tiffany, is as a divorce attorney. So, I work with mostly women, but some men as well.
Mhm.
And I really see how people get so stuck and have such a hard time making that change. So, do you have any examples like in your own personal life or like what you see people
Yeah.
getting really stuck?
Yeah, I think we're for myself, I'm a creative entrepreneur. I've helped launch a telemed company. Helped design jewelry cups for the Apple Watch, and I feel like being a female creative and a leader, it's hard to really stand out and make big changes. So, like starting this, for example, was a really big change too. But I feel like a lot of people are scared to find themselves and to really go after what they feel like they would be really ultimately awesome at, because they're just scared. They're scared of, what if I fail? What if people are looking at me making silly TikToks like I'm doing now? Like, I don't care. Because you know what? I'm that unfiltered friend that is going to make the big changes and hopefully inspire others to do the same.
And I find that anytime you put yourself out there and take risk, there are going to be critics. And
Yes.
I have a decent following on TikTok, and I get comments about, I'm not listening to a lawyer with a nose ring,
Yeah.
and you just have to ignore the haters
Mhm.
and just know your truth and, really work on just building the best life for yourself. And the reality is like you can't be so fearful of failure, at least myself, like, I've learned from failure.
Yeah.
I'm on my 3rd marriage, I've been divorced
Yeah.
twice, right?
Right.
And, I guess you can see those both as a failure, but I learned from it,
Yeah.
and, I can't say I really regret choices that I've made.
Yeah.
I launched a business before that I guess you could say it failed. I mean,
Right.
I didn't
Yeah.
make any money, and
Same with my jewelry business. Yeah.
yeah, and,
Mhm.
you learn from it.
Mhm.
So it's, something that people just need to accept is
Right.
failure is okay. You learn from it, you pivot, and you keep growing.
Yeah, and I wanna take a step back right there where you mentioned, as far as, like, divorce and failure and things like that, right? Or any of those things, I remember when I was first went through my divorce, and I felt so alone. I was 36, my daughter, Gabby, she was 5, and at that time, so many of her friends, they were still married, and I was, like, the first one. I felt like such an outsider, like I didn't have a tribe of people, like, she was rolling her little luggage suitcase to school, and then she was embarrassed by that. I was like, "Okay, we can figure out another way around it." But the one thing that I really wanted to break the stigma about is that anytime I told people about changes that happened in my life, whether it was my divorce or if a business didn't succeed or if I switched jobs, the first thing that people say is like, "Oh, I'm so
I
sorry."
hate that.
Oh,
Like, I'm
no.
not.
No, and I started coming up with some little sayings about that, like, "Save your sorries," because and this was, like, my jewelry brand that I started, it was wholeheartedly, it was like, "I'm not broken. Don't feel bad for me." I almost feel
Mhm.
bad for the people that are just hanging around, not making the decisions to live their
Yes,
life because whether it's in a marriage or a job or honestly in anything, right? So, I'm like, "No, these stories are pieces of me, and they make me whole," right?
absolutely, absolutely, and something I've been noticing in my career working with people going through divorce is I do all the consultations right now for our firm. And how many people will have a consultation, they're so unhappy, and they tell me the story of
Mhm.
how long they have been miserable, and they still don't make the move.
Yeah.
And so then they'll, go away, and I might hear back from them in
Mhm.
a year. And
Wow.
yeah, and that's actually very common for someone to come back a year later.
Yeah.
And, so something I talk a lot with people about is what is holding you back from making this big
It's
change?
scary, it's hard.
Yes, and something that I think plays into it are cognitive biases.
Uh-huh.
And I wrote it down. Let me kind of read. Like I googled what is a cognitive bias
Yeah.
because I thought this was like a really good um, explanation. So it's a mental shortcut that our brain uses to
Mm.
simplify complex information processing, but these shortcuts can lead to predictable errors in judgment. And one of
Oh,
those is called the status quo bias,
okay.
which I think with career changes and divorce, I see this a lot where um, we know what to expect even in our bad
Yeah.
situation. And we're so fearful of the unknown. And
Mhm.
I think this is like evolutionary maybe. Like, as
Right.
cavemen, there really was the danger of the tiger outside the cave, so
Yeah.
it makes sense to, stay where you're at, but,
Yeah.
we don't have those same dangers now,
No.
and, I think it's important to identify that the fear isn't rational,
Right.
and you have to push through that fear because it's lying to you.
Totally.
And, just staying stuck, like, we only have one life, right?
Right.
You're, like,
Right.
wasting it away,
Right.
staying in that miserable job or the bad marriage. So, in your opinion, how do you know when is it time to call it quits or if this is just a bad slump?
Right. So I think back to when I was contemplating divorce, and now I have to say, like, I feel like I'm so blessed. I have an amazing co-parent. He is an amazing father to Gabby. So I'm one of the fortunate ones. I know that you hear a lot of totally opposite stories, but I can say that when with my experience there, I made the first step. I was like, okay, we have to check the boxes. You go to the therapist, the marriage counselor. And I remember her saying to me, she said, okay, let's put like a timeline in your head. And you don't have to do anything by then, but let's just say in 6 months from now, let's just check in where you're at. Right. And I remember thinking, like, okay, that's not enough time, right? And then when I really started getting real with it, which is now I understand why so many people don't want to go to therapy because they're not going to tell you what to do, but they're going to present things to you so that you can make the decisions. And people don't want to be faced with that because then they have to do something.
Yep.
So shortly thereafter, honestly, was a couple of weeks, I was like, oh my God, no, this is not right. And I needed to realize that, you know, her dad and I, there was nothing wrong there. It was just that we were different people. We grew up and people will say like, "Oh, did you fall out of love?" And I'm like, "No, I don't think it's ever that. I think it's, we were really young. We started dating when I was 19, and you don't know who you are to be able
Mhm.
to go in relationships and discover yourself, let alone your partner or who you are and what you want. So you mostly just grow, and then you either are growing together or you're growing apart because you never really were sure of who you are to begin with. So I remember thinking like, oh, 6 months is now too far away. Like,
Yeah.
and then it was just very difficult. And it's like that with honestly, with anything, with my recent job that I switched to, realizing that this is no longer serving me, right? And I'm a little bit of woo woo, maybe not a lot, but I like to believe and understand that there's like the universe has a plan, and we all have gifts that we're supposed to offer to people, or not we're supposed to, but I feel like I have a gift and I want to bring people together in conversations and community. But you know, w- the universe cannot bring down gifts for you and bring you something better if you're full already.
Yeah.
So, there's no room there. You're never, so many people, so many friends of mine are staying in
Yeah, if you
unhappy
fill your life with
relationships.
the wrong things, there's
Yeah.
not room for, like, those additional
They're like,
blessings
"How am I
yeah.
gonna meet somebody again? How many of this and that?" And they're like, "Oh, but it's only been 10 years and you're still single." I'm like, "Yeah, but there's choices there that I want, and I'm focusing on
Yeah.
my career and my daughter and myself, honestly." So, you
And that's a
know
whole nother conversation, like, being single is not a
Yeah.
bad thing. Being
No.
in a bad relationship
Is a bad
is a
thing.
bad thing.
But the biggest thing I think for me there, well, there's a bit of conversation about work and changing and accepting, but also, for myself with a relationship was, it was my responsibility as a parent, as a mother, to model what a loving relationship looks like. And it's not that we didn't have one, it's just that we didn't model like a close, touchy, huggy,
Yeah.
feely, um, and I wanted that for my daughter.
Yeah.
So the longer I was modeling that this is what it was like, because we all make decisions based on what we know and we grow up, and there's a whole other topic there about seeing the relationships that my mom has gone through too,
Yeah.
and super codependent. And I didn't want that for my daughter.
Yeah, and your husband didn't want the divorce, right?
No, he didn't.
And that's
Mm-mm.
something else I think that we have this fear of disappointing other people or
Yes.
letting them
Mm-hmm.
down,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll stay in a bad situation. I've been like that with jobs where
Yes.
I'm like, it is so hard to resign from a job.
Ugh.
At least for me, it's like
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm breaking up with someone.
Yes.
I will feel nervous the entire
Oh my god, but when
day
they're done
and
with you, they're done with you.
yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
by the way, there's a whole other topic is that workplaces are not families.
Yes.
There's a whole thing about that now, like, let's be real, they are not families.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
Mhm.
But, you just have to, just kinda push through that and know that you can't live your life for other people. It can't be
Mhm.
100% like, I can't make a decision because I might disappoint
Right.
my spouse or my employer. And, really something that when I was in a bad marriage, I had to tell myself was like, "Look, even though he doesn't want the divorce, he deserves to be with someone who wants to be there."
Yes. Yes.
And I've seen that a lot where someone who didn't want the divorce later is like, even though I didn't want it, this was the best thing for both of us.
Right.
And, my ex is remarried, and
Mhm.
I'm pretty sure it's a better situation than what he and
Yeah.
I had.
Yeah.
And that's better for my son to then see his parents in better relationships.
Yep.
Or, if one of us hadn't moved on or both of us hadn't to a different relationship, being single and living an
Mhm.
awesome life, not having to have that partner.
Well, I think what also is a similar situation for both of us too is that, yeah, like our partners have moved on and remarried and each have had kids too.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the fact that my ex-husband is able to give my daughter a sibling, like I love that. And you
Yeah.
have that as well. And I think it's awesome.
Yeah, when Logan was probably about 5 years old, so my ex and I separated when Logan was 4, and when Logan was 5, he said something to me that kinda broke my heart. He said, "Mommy, when I'm with you, I miss daddy, and when I'm with daddy, I miss you." And so
Mm,
there was a part of me that was like, "Oh, did I
I
make the
know.
wrong decision? Oh my god."
Yeah.
And then years later, I asked him, and this was after, both of us had remarried and after his brother had been born, and I asked, "Logan, one time you told me this. Do you
Yeah.
still feel that way?" And he thought for a minute and he said, "No, I wouldn't want you and daddy to be married still because then I wouldn't have my brother
Right.
and my stepmom and my stepdad and
Oh.
stepsisters." And he's like, "I wouldn't want this to be different."
Yep.
So that's when I was like, thank God, like I did do the right thing. Like staying in a bad situation
Right.
isn't good even for the ones around us.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty amazing. I mean, so I was listening to a podcast, one of my favorite podcasts this morning, on our way here, and it's the Diary of a CEO. And he had on one of his guests, and it was Jefferson Fisher, who he's a trial attorney. I think you said you mentioned you follow
I
him.
follow him on TikTok. I love him.
He's awesome. I mean, he gives really great tips about
Mhm.
communication and, conflict resolution and just everything. And there was something that really resonated with me that he said. And it was about, so we talk about on our show here about microdosing topics, right? So they can be more digestible and people can kind of take them in a little bit easier and learn a little bit something along the way. And he was saying that, we never really know what's going on with a person, an individual, in any one of any micro moments he mentioned. So he said, if we all just take the moment to be patient and get to know somebody, we can form deeper relationships. And I thought that's pretty amazing. Anytime I'm having a conversation with somebody or I'm approaching them, I try to always think like, what could be going on in their world? It's not always about me. They could be, dealing with a sick parent at home or a child that's, difficult or, mental health. That's a huge thing, right? So we never know. But I think what I'm trying to hope and inspire is that we're going to be authentic and those unfiltered friends so that we can give people the inspiration to share a little bit of what's going on with themselves or for them to feel as though it's okay and it's safe to share what's going on with them because we're not always okay. There's plenty of times when I reach out to different friends and I'm like, hey, I'm actually really not doing good right now. I need a moment to talk about this and it's totally okay. So
Yeah.
micro moments is really a big thing.
And I think that's just a good point to think about how we don't know what other people are going through.
Hmm.
A lot of times when people do make a big change, like they say, I am ending this relationship or I am moving on to something different in my career,
Yeah.
the people around them don't realize that they were in such a bad place.
Yeah.
It's just normal for us to kind of hide that. I know for relationships, it's like you don't want your friends and people around you to think badly about the person you're with while you're
Hmm.
still trying to make it
Oh,
work.
totally.
So you don't share it. So I do think that's important to be supportive of people in our life when they do get to the point to make that big change,
Hmm.
even if it's a surprise to us. And we've all had that person where it's like, what? They're getting divorced? And,
Right. You
instead
start
of,
noticing on Facebook,
yeah,
that's also another thing too, right? So it's like, while I'm trying to up my followers on all the platforms just for this purpose of this, but like, I've never been one to kind of post every single moment. And there's so many people who are posting every single picture perfect moment. And that is
yeah.
really super filtered. And then when you see the dramatic shift, they're no longer posting. Something's going on there.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I think that one thing that can really help make a change if a big change is needed is to
Hmm.
surround yourself with the right people. Find the friends and the support, the people who are not going to judge you.
Right.
And, I'll also say that when I divorced for the second time, so one fear I had was like,
Uh-huh.
I'm divorcing again.
Yeah.
And I think I was in my 30s, my second divorce, but I was fearful of that
Yeah.
judgment and what are people going to think? And people in my life really surprised me. Even my parents, who I
Mm,
grew up in, like, it wasn't Baptist, but was very religious, conservative
yeah.
Christian, like, you don't get divorced. And
Right.
then here I was about to divorce a second time. And like, oh my God. But then once I told everyone, I can't think of a single person in my life who wasn't supportive.
Yeah.
But, that's just important is to have
Mhm.
genuine, good friends around you.
I think that's awesome that you had that support. I waited definitely. I only told, like, my older sister at first and one of my best friends because my relationship was a bit different in the sense that everybody looked at us like the picture perfect couple and partner, and like I said, he was in, many areas, but so I didn't want the judgment of, you're gonna end up being multiple times divorced like my mom, right?
Yeah.
4 times, maybe 5. I honestly don't even know. Mom, you're gonna have to tell me because there's probably some marriages there that I honestly don't know about, but, like, I was so worried to end up like that
Yeah.
too, so I waited until I was fully comfortable and could stand firmly so that there was no swaying of my mind in any sort of way, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes you just gotta do what you gotta do
Because
to
you
get
didn't
through
wanna
it.
hear what other people were
Yeah.
saying and have it
I
change your
didn't
mind.
Yeah, exactly, I didn't wanna be influenced, and
Yeah.
sometimes you just have to know when you hold things back.
Yeah.
Um,
And do you remember that I tried to date your
I
ex-husband?
do.
I forgot about that, and that's making me remember because he is such a nice guy, like,
Yes.
he's cute, like, he's a great guy.
He's
Did I
he's
ever
successful. You tried reaching out to him and setting up a play date, and I remember
He was not
texting him.
interested.
So I thought, like, "Oh my god," because
And of course, I asked you first. I don't want anyone
I
to think I was,
know.
like, hitting on your ex
No,
but yeah,
no,
you're
and
like,
I
"Yeah, go
I
right ahead."
remember, like, I was dating somebody at the time, and I remember, like, waking up to a text message. We were in a group text message with our friend Amanda, and you were like, "Hey, actually, what do you think about this?" And I was like, "Yeah, okay." And then I remember texting him and I'm like, "Hey, I don't want you to think like," because he's very, like, serious in his personality and very much about respect, and I get that. And he's Latin, he's Colombian, and I get that, but I was like, "Oh my god," I was so worried, like, I don't want him to think that I'm, like, poking fun or something. Like, it was like, "Jeanette's gonna reach out to you about setting up a play date with, like, you and Logan," yeah. But then you were like, "Oh, Logan and Gabby were, like, best friends." So, like, he used to, like, hold her hand on the
Yeah.
way to class in the playground. We're like, "They could be siblings. It could be great."
Yeah,
Yeah.
Manny had no interest.
Yeah, yeah, uh-huh.
So when you divorced him, I'm trying to think, like, how did I react? Was I like, "Why would you divorce
I don't
Manny?" Because I
I actually
thought he was
can't even
great.
yeah, I can't even remember.
I don't remember either. I mean, I remember being supportive of you
Yeah.
and, um
I honestly think a lot of that time for me personally was overshadowed by, a topic that we'll talk about some other time about I had this 6 months
yeah,
pregnancy and I had to do a late term abortion. The baby was really sick. That's a whole other episode.
yeah,
I had recently come out of that probably about a year before then, and that was one of my big moments, honestly, going through that, and it had nothing to do with him, but it had everything to do with through that, I felt alone, and it was that he didn't know how to show up for me, but also I didn't know really how to show up for myself going through that, and that was I'm getting upset, but that was, like, a pivotal moment
yeah,
where I realized, you know what? Like, life's too short. Um,
absolutely.
so let's talk about something else.
One piece of advice I have for people, and I think you touched on this a little bit talking about going to therapy and, working through what you needed to leave your marriage. And I did the same thing. I went to therapy. I'm like, I'm really unhappy here. And like the first thing for me was knowing that I had done everything I could to try to fix it.
Yeah.
And I had. I mean, we had done so much therapy. We'd tried different things
Mhm.
and it wasn't getting better. So then I went to individual therapy and, I knew that, like, my bottom line was there has to be a net positive here. Like, if I'm getting more sadness or frustration or
Right,
unhappiness than I
right.
am the positive things, like, I
Yeah,
can't live my life like that.
yeah.
And so I went to therapy, and the therapist was great because it wasn't like she basically told me, "You don't have to make a change overnight."
Yes,
So she's like,
yes.
"What do you need to change?"
Mhm.
And I listed, "These are the things I need in my marriage."
Yep.
And she said, "Okay, how much time do you think is reasonable for those things to happen?"
Mhm.
And I think I said, like, 2 months.
Yeah,
And she said, "Okay, if those things don't happen in 2 months, then what do you do?"
right.
And she, like, did these baby steps. And so it was, "Okay, here's the things I needed to change. I
Mm.
needed it to change in my marriage."
Like, what were some
And
of them, for example?
oh gosh. So a really big disconnect that Kelly, my ex-husband, and I had, and it took me a long time to see this from the perspective I have now that we just were too different in what we wanted in life and our values.
Mm.
At the time, I was like, he's not motivated. He doesn't wanna
Yeah.
work hard. I grew up, in that very traditional, like, my dad was the bread maker.
Mhm.
My mom, she was a nurse. She, like, worked part-time, but
Mhm.
my dad's job was to take care of the family, right?
Oh, okay.
So, in my marriage, that's just something I mean, even now that I value, not necessarily being taken care of, like,
Yeah.
I very much am, like, career-oriented,
Yes.
but it was during the recession, and, we were upside down on a house, and I was struggling,
Mhm.
so that was really hard for us. So, I think one thing that I said was, there needs to be more financial contribution.
Yeah.
And that was just for me. That wasn't
Right.
like, now I can look at it and say, he wasn't wrong
Sure.
in, wanting to do what he did for his career. It was
Sure.
just we had different goals. Like,
Yes.
I value financial security,
Same for me.
and
Mhm.
he values kind of chasing your dream for your job, right?
Yeah.
Um, so that was one thing. So
Although I believe you can have it both.
I do too, and I
Mhm.
actually think that would be another good
Mhm.
episode, and, like, how do you build a career that
Totally.
is, like, that meets your needs as
Yeah.
opposed to the other way around.
Exactly.
But sometimes when you're young, like, in your late 20s,
Mhm.
you have to just hustle and and
Exactly.
lay the foundations to give yourself the ability to build that
Yeah.
flexible career.
Of course.
But she basically had these baby steps. So I went to him. I'm like, "Hey, here's what I need. I need it by this time. If it doesn't happen, I need you to move into the basement." I know. I know. Like, you're not going. But
I
the
don't know if I
therapist
remembered. I don't know if I knew about that.
I may not have even told you, but I was like, "Okay, here's what I need. I can't be in the same bedroom." And the basement, like, there was a bedroom. I mean, it wasn't
Oh,
like
yeah.
yeah, it was like there's a bedroom, a bathroom, whatever. And those things didn't change. So I was like, "All right." Like, basically, we need to separate within the home,
Mhm.
and he was like, "Okay," and he moved to the other bedroom, and then there was like, "Okay, what's the next step? Like, if nothing changes by, this date," and then eventually it was, "Okay,
Yeah.
we're divorcing, and
Right.
let's figure out when you're moving out."
Yeah. Yeah.
But it did help to just
Mhm.
give myself that timeline
Yep.
and hold myself to it. It's not easy.
No.
Nothing about it is easy. It's actually incredibly hard,
Incredibly difficult.
but you have to hold yourself to it.
Yeah.
When you know this is the change that needs to be made,
Yeah.
do it, but do it in those baby steps so you don't get
Mhm.
overwhelmed.
Yeah. Totally. I remember thinking like, how am I gonna do this? I had like a long-term career. I was working at Carter's baby clothing company and like, I loved my job and everything there. And then I'm like, well, how am I gonna go to being like a co-parent and going to like leave work and pick her up from school? So we sold our house. I ended up buying a condo down the street from work and it ended up working out like really great. But you have to make changes and
Yeah.
figure things out. But I almost like I remember there was a moment where I was so nervous. I had a little Yorkie Lola. I loved my little
Yeah.
Lola. And I remember thinking at the time, like, she was a condo dog, right? So she always was home by herself all day, no matter what. But I remember thinking for a short while, like, I don't know if I can handle this. I have to, like, give her away, to somebody, to a family friend or something, because I didn't think I can handle it all. And I was just so nervous. And you think about all the things you have to do and go through. And then you find out, like, actually the quality time that I had spent with Gabby, it was so much more. I was able to be present.
Yes.
Now, I'm still, like, struggling with my ADHD all the time and being, like, pulled away from technology and stuff, but I was able to block out, like, where I'm with her for batches of days,
Yeah.
and it's 100% because then, somebody real mentioned it to me once before. They were like, "Oh, like, you're the mom and the dad." I'm like, "Well, no, like, her dad is a very involved dad. He's a great dad." And like, "Well, no, like, the days that she's with you, you're mom and dad." And I was like, "Oh, you're right." Like, I kinda have to know how to
Yeah.
do it all, and it's all on me, right? But then you get a break,
Mhm.
and I don't know, it just worked out. It was a good balance
Yeah, and
while it was
that's something
hard.
that's something I found too. Like, I think I actually was a more involved parent after divorce because and we did week on, week off. We did 50-50 custody,
Yeah.
and I was able to really focus on my career on the weeks I
Mhm.
didn't have Logan, and I would work. I mean, there were times where I'd be at the office until 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock,
Yes.
but I would, like, pour myself into that,
Yep,
and I could focus on just
and clear
that.
your schedule away.
And then the next week, I'd
Mhm.
kinda take it easy, and I could pick Logan up at school at,
Yeah.
3:30 and go to the basketball practice after
Right,
school and
right.
really spend quality time, whereas when I was in a marriage, I don't
Mhm.
think there was as much of that quality time. It was more like
Yeah.
just us trying to juggle everything.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot for sure. So So I know we talked a little bit about, we get stuck in marriage and relationships, and we only did a little bit on the career, but let's talk about appearance and identity,
Yeah.
right? So, we've been through a really big transformation with ourselves, losing a ton of weight. Like I've lost a little over 80 pounds and you've
Yeah, I
lost,
lost
yeah.
120.
Yeah, it's huge. And the strength and courage to find something that's worked for us, right? So for me and for you too, I know it's been GLP-1s and, there's so much stigma behind it. We'll do other topics about that too. But, knowing that it's okay to find something that works for you and feeling okay to talk about it, right?
Yeah.
So, like, I would love to know your thoughts on that and your experience going through that, deciding to make
Yeah.
that change for yourself.
So, I think the biggest lesson from my own story of weight loss isn't so much like finding the courage to make that change.
Mhm.
It's being okay with the failure of trying and trying again.
Right, right.
So I've
Well, that's
been,
what, like, society has told us, just
yes.
eat better and, exercise, and then it's gonna work
Yeah.
for you. No.
Yeah, and so, like, it was so frustrating, my weight loss journey, because I've been successful at anything that I want to
Yeah.
achieve. I mean, I went to law school, I've,
Mhm.
eventually started a successful business,
Yep.
eventually found the right marriage, right?
Right.
But with my weight, it was something where, like,
It's so close to you, felt like you couldn't
I
couldn't
just
have control over it.
couldn't
Mhm.
get it right, and the
I'm the
things I
same.
tried, like, and I had 2 weight loss surgeries, and so, I think a lot of kind of what I learned and what I'm glad that I, kept doing was kept trying.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people after 2 weight loss surgeries would have just been like, "Pff,
Forget it.
forget it," like, and I
And
did a
then you start
little
thinking like
bit.
you're broken, which is what I started
I mean,
feeling
I
too.
think I was broke. I mean, I was
Mhm.
broken, like, there
Yeah.
was something broken, and really until I found the GLP-1
Mhm.
medication, like, I don't think it was possible for me to lose
Totally.
the weight. But, we're talking about, like, a struggle of over my first weight loss surgery, I was in law school.
Oh, I didn't
So,
realize you had it
I
then.
had the lap band when it first came out,
Okay.
and, I mean, this has been such a struggle for me. I've always stayed on
Mhm.
top of, like, what are the treatments? Like, what's
Yeah.
available? How can I fix this?
I remember when I
And
first met you, you were just like, "I'm just okay being this way," and you just were like, "That's fine because 'cause you've
I
learned
tried,
that's
yeah, like,
this
I
is it."
tried so many things, and,
What made you, decide to do that while you're in college? Because that's a lot to do
so
too.
yeah, so when I was in law school, I was having knee pain, and I was
Oh.
20, 24, 25,
Uh-huh.
and we would carry these huge book bags full of law
Yeah.
books, but,
Now there's, like, tablets,
I
everything.
know, right? So, I was heavy, and then I was carrying all this heavy stuff, and then I lived in an apartment that was
Mm.
on, like, the 2nd or 3rd floor, and my knees would hurt, and I remember thinking, like, "I am in my 20s and
Yeah.
having knee pain. This is, like, crazy."
Right.
And I had, like, I'd tried all the diets, and I do remember in law school at that time, I was like, "Okay, the only thing that's ever worked somewhat for me is low carb."
Mhm.
So I did, like, hardcore low carb, and with everything, I would lose some,
Yeah.
but not enough.
Right. Right.
And so
And then you just eat, like, one small thing, and then it's like it's back, but tenfold.
yes, yeah.
Mhm.
So I did lap band in law school, and I lost a little bit, like, I think I
Mhm.
lost 30 pounds, but I needed to lose 100.
Wow.
And then I'm trying to think. So I had gastric bypass in probably 2015. It was a
Okay.
number of years later. I'm probably 10
So
years
how much did
later.
you lose from the first one?
Only like 30 pounds,
Okay, 30
and I needed
pounds.
to lose like 100.
Okay.
And then I did, like, I worked with personal trainers. I did,
Yeah.
like, all kinds of different diets.
Mhm.
I was diagnosed with PCOS, polycystic ovarian
Mm.
syndrome, and this is what really kind of kickstarted the, "Okay, I need to start thinking about another bariatric surgery," is I, was diagnosed as pre-diabetic.
Oh.
Yeah, and so that was, like, probably about 2014,
Uh-huh.
and I talked to my primary care physician, and I tried more diet and exercise, and it just didn't work, and she did tell me, like, "I don't think that you're gonna be successful with this unless you start thinking about another bariatric surgery."
Yeah.
And we, like, fought my insurance and had to go through a lot, and
Wow.
we did get insurance to pay for it, but the gastric bypass didn't even work, which for most people, like, I think like, the vast majority of people who have gastric bypass lose, like, 80% of their excess weight, and I did not, and it was not
And what did the doctor say?
he was just like, "There's some outliers who it doesn't work
You're like,
for,"
"Thanks
and
so much."
yeah, yeah. I was just one of the minority that
Mhm.
it just didn't work. And it wasn't for lack of trying.
Right,
Like, I
right.
measured, I counted calories, I counted protein, I exercised,
Yeah,
and I did lose 50 pounds, but at that point, I needed to lose a little over 100.
yeah.
And then once I got that 50 pounds off, it started slowly creeping back on
Mhm.
to where, like, I regained most of it. But I still, I would say I kinda got to the point of acceptance. I'm more like, this isn't gonna change for me, so I'm not gonna let
Right.
it, like, ruin my happiness, right?
Yeah.
But then when, Mounjaro came out, like, I remember on my phone, like, a CNN article popped up and was like, "This weight loss drug is about," or I guess at the time it was a drug for diabetes,
Yep.
but studies show that people lose, like, 20% of their weight. And I was like, "Hey, if I could lose 20% of my
Yes.
weight," which would have been 50 pounds. I was 100 pounds
Right.
more than 100 pounds overweight. But I was like, "Hey, if I could lose,
Mhm.
20%, I would at least get to a much healthier place."
Yeah.
And
'Cause at
surpri
that point, like, we were and I know for myself too, I just wanted to get one little step closer, right? It was
Yeah.
in those small little steps.
I had, like, made the kind of the realization or accepted, I guess, is a better word. I had accepted that I'm probably not going to get to a healthy BMI.
Yeah.
Like, when I started Mounjaro, that was not even,
Right.
like, something I desired anymore because I thought, "This is not something my body will
Yeah.
allow to happen."
Yeah.
But if I could get from and I remember telling the doctor who prescribed it, I would love to get from morbidly obese to overweight. Like, to
Right.
be overweight
Right.
would be a
You
dream.
were just so used to accepting,
Yeah.
like, the bare minimum results of things. I remember you would set your goals, and then I started doing the same thing for myself, and, like, your goals would only be, like, 30
Oh,
pounds at a
yeah.
time, and you're like, "Oh, I'm just gonna get there," and then you'd keep losing, 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 and you're like, "Oh my god,"
Yeah, it's
like
like, I guess I'll set another goal, but I did
yeah.
do the baby steps
Mhm.
because I didn't wanna be disappointed
Right.
and give up,
Mhm.
right? So, yeah, and I think doing things in baby steps is just a
It's
healthy
the
way to
way to
not get
go.
overwhelmed.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about making, some big changes in the career area. So, I had mentioned I worked at Carter's for, like, 14 years, and I, like, loved it there, but I felt so comfortable, and, it was recession proof, it was COVID proof, it was everything proof, right? And I had learned all of my skills in all the different areas, and I just kinda felt like I was going through the motions a little bit, and I remember so many people saying to me, like, "You should just start your own thing, like, there's so many opportunities out there for you," and I was just scared. I was scared
Mhm.
of, losing that stability. I have one of my girlfriends, Crystal, who she followed Mastin Kipp, and she, listened to a lot of his audio and stuff, and she did this whole thing where she went to this retreat in Bali. It was so amazing. She came back because she worked with me there then, and she packed up her desk and was, like, ready to go, and then she's like, "The day is gonna come upon me pretty soon where I'm gonna be like, 'Today's the day,'" and it was, and I would watch her over the years and how she would grow, and she's, you know, found a business partner and renovating homes and doing all these cool things, and I'd be like, "Oh, that's so cool," but I'm like, "But I'm a single mom," but I'm like, "But she is too."
I remember you saying that to me. I'm
And
like,
she just figured it
"Tiffany,"
out.
because like, you would make so much money from side hustles,
Yes,
and I'm like,
yes.
"Tiffany, if you made that full time, you'd
Right,
be making so much money." But
right.
I get it too. You were like, "I'm a single mom," and
Mhm.
it's scary not
It is.
knowing how much money you're gonna make.
Right.
So I've I kind of have been like Goldilocks when it comes to jobs,
Yeah.
and maybe husbands too, I don't know. But, I've made a lot of career changes because, like, I just tried different things out and nothing was ever quite right. And, my first job out of law school was representing, like, DFACS, like, child abuse and neglect, but it, like, didn't pay anything.
Mhm.
And then the recession, like, with, like, the Great Recession was, like, right when I started practicing, like, a year after I started practicing. So, that caused a lot of difficulty in the legal world. But, one of the biggest risks I took in my career was I did quit my job when I was a single mom and start my own
Mm,
firm, and that firm wasn't successful. So
right.
I think this is a big lesson from, what I did and is important is to think through what is the worst case scenario and
Mhm.
to not catastrophize. Was that, did I say that right?
Uh,
Catastrophize? Anyway.
yeah. Let's go with that.
Yes. To not blow it way out of proportion.
Yeah.
Because I do think that people, like I know people who I talk to are thinking about divorce. It's like,
Mhm.
they may make $150,000 and for some reason they think they're going to be living in a cardboard box or
Right.
and it's like they really blow it out of proportion. So I think it's important to have a practical conversation with yourself of what is the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
And I did think through that like, okay, I'm a single mom and I like didn't get child support. So if I start my own business, what is the worst case scenario?
Mhm.
And the worst case scenario was I'll have to live off of some loans
Yeah.
if I don't bring in the clients. But the worst case scenario was not I was going to be homeless or
No,
I wasn't
it
going to
never
be
is.
able to feed my kid. Exactly. Like
Yeah.
that doesn't happen to people who are healthy and
Right.
smart, right?
Yeah.
Unless something, catastrophic happens with
Yeah.
disability or whatever. And the worst did happen for me. And I started my firm. I could not figure the marketing out. Like I could
Uh-huh.
not figure out how to bring in the clients. I lived off of like credit cards and borrowed money from my
Yep.
dad and like, cobbled together like how to pay for basics.
Mhm.
And that was the worst case was living off of credit cards.
Yeah.
And then after a year of that, an opportunity came up to join another firm.
Mhm.
And I remember even though I mean technically my firm was a failure. I wasn't making any money.
Right.
I still did not immediately jump on that job. Like,
Yeah.
I really had to think through it because I'm like, I could figure the marketing out.
Yep.
Like, it's been a year, but, am I really going to do something different? And then even in that situation, I'm like, what's the worst case scenario?
Mhm.
If this doesn't work, then I can always start my own firm again, right?
Totally.
We just, make choices seem
Yeah.
more significant or important than they really are.
Yep.
Like, the sky is not going to fall
No.
if I lose a job or if I don't make the kind of money I want because we have other options.
Totally.
And I did accept that job. And it was such a blessing because it was a tiny firm. I was like the first lawyer hire, and I saw how to grow a business and how to run a firm like a business,
Yeah.
which they don't teach you in law school.
No.
And
I mean,
so
honestly, even I didn't go to law school. I went to school for graphic
they
design,
don't teach it
and
there. Yeah.
they don't teach you, like, how to, like, market yourself and do all the things. Like, you're learning the basics of the program, but you're figuring it out as you go.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, exactly. So I was in a situation where I was able to learn that. And I actually didn't learn it for the purpose of starting my own business again,
Mhm.
but I eventually got to the point in that job where I just I wasn't happy.
Right.
And I knew again like I needed to make a change. But at that point I had the information and the knowledge to know how to hit the ground running. And then it was a completely
Mhm.
different experience where from day one, I was bringing in clients and,
Yeah.
it's been such a positive situation. But if I hadn't had that year where I was broke as shit,
Mhm.
I living off of credit cards and then taking the risk to go work for this brand new firm that,
Yeah.
I didn't know how that was going to work out. If I had done none of that, I wouldn't be where I'm at today.
Not at all. So I think it's fair to say that there's a few signs that we know we can recognize when it's time to make a shift, right? So I think like waking up every day feeling like you're dreading it, right?
Yeah.
Oh, for me, it's been dental stuff. Like I needed two crowns recently or root canals, but then the crowns too, because I've been like clenching with stress so much that
Do you
like
have a night guard? I've worn a night guard for
no,
years.
I need to get one really because I've had one before, but then I tend to like spit it out. So I need to get one. But yeah, so teeth stuff, it shows up in your body and my shoulders and the tension, right? So then you're constantly, I think another one too is you're fantasizing about a life, right? Whether it's your work, your body, your relationships, of something that you don't have. And then you feel like, you're constantly you're getting smaller instead of expanding. And that's where I
Yeah.
started feeling like, with my job, I was there for 14 years and I'm like, I feel like I've kind of learned everything I need to know here. And now what else do I have to offer to the world and to
Yeah.
learn? And then like, another point too, which you mentioned with your marriage too, you've tried to fix things and,
And yeah, and I think
nothing's
that's relevant to career as well.
mhm.
And I would say that, within the
And
job
with
I
our
had.
body images too.
Exactly, yeah, with
Mhm.
our body image and everything else, I did try to fix it, like, "Okay, why am I unhappy in the
Yeah,
position I'm in? What could potentially be different?"
right.
Talk to, the people you work with, and, there were definitely things that I tried to tweak
Mhm.
and then realized, "Okay, I've tried to make the situation work.
Yeah.
I'm not happy. It's time to make the change."
Oh my god, totally. So, I think, a few of the things that, the reasons why we struggle, like you mentioned, there's the cognitive biases, the fear of uncertainty, and then people pleasing and guilt. So some of
Mhm.
those are the big things, and I think, like, you know, um, I've really enjoyed chatting with you about this today. So I feel like, if you're feeling stuck, it's never too late to make a change, and that's the most important thing to know, right? It's
Yeah.
just take things in small little steps and it'll just all of a sudden feel like a lot easier and
Yeah,
find your
absolutely.
friends and community that can support you along the way
Yeah.
and know that it's okay if you make mistakes because
Yeah.
you can always do it again. I think like what would be a fun thing to do is end each one of our episodes for a little moment of gratitude. I know that's something that's really important to you, and to myself as well too. So do you want to say a moment of gratitude?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm grateful for this opportunity and doing this
Yeah.
podcast. Like it's something new and fun.
Yes.
And just like the time we spent together, like we went shopping
Yes.
for our like
It's so
photo
fun.
shoot.
Yeah.
And I get bored with like the mundane, like doing the same thing over and
Mhm.
over. And so I always enjoy just a
Keeping it
new,
fresh.
yeah, keeping it fresh and a new
Mhm.
thing to do and focus on.
Yeah, and my hope and, is that I think for myself, what's really big is that I feel so overwhelmed by life, and you have to feel like, you have to do the face wash routine, you have to do the workouts, you have to do this and be the perfect mom and pack all the bento box lunches and da 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 da. And I get so overwhelmed that I get stuck, right? And since this episode was all about getting unstuck, it's breaking down little moments. So my hope is that people will listen to this and just feel a little less unstuck. That maybe there's something that we said along the way that they've resonated with that they're like, oh, I can make that small little change, or it's not that difficult because we're here to be your unfiltered friends
Hmm.
and shoot straight. And yeah, as far as me, like gratitude, I am thankful for you, honestly, for like trusting me and like when I'm like, hey, I'm gonna do this. And you're like, okay, cool. Cause I know that you're that friend that will just go and do it. And it's awesome. And I'm so thankful for you. But I'm thankful for this opportunity too, to be able to share with others and inspire them to make little
Yeah.
changes along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a few books I wanna recommend,
Yeah,
folks.
please
So there's
do.
one called Daring Greatly by Brené
Yes.
Brown,
Love her.
which is fantastic, and
Mhm.
another one is called The Power of TED: The Empowerment Dynamic,
Oh, I've
which
never
I
heard of that
think, yeah,
one.
it's great. Check it out. So
Okay,
for anyone
okay.
who feels stuck, it's
Yes,
it's a really great book.
I
And
love
then
it.
for anyone who is contemplating divorce,
Mm.
my favorite is called Too Good to Leave, Too Bad to Stay,
Oh, that
and
title alone says
exactly.
enough.
And the author is her name's Mira Kirschenbaum, and it's really good at helping you just kinda analyze, like, should I stay or go?
I love that. So, let's see, I would say we could give a little challenge too. So, if we were to give a challenge to people who are listening, what is just one area that they could identify that they would feel stuck and just think about it and
Yeah, I mean, I think, think through where are you stuck, and what would be the worst case scenario if you made a change?
yep,
And be truthful with yourself. Don't make it the catastrophe. I'm
right.
gonna be in the homeless shelter
Yes,
and,
it's not as bad as you
eating
think.
cans of beans. No, you're
Right,
not.
right. Make sure to keep listening and subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow us on social media at A Holistic Dose on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube for more fun. Thanks for hanging out with us. We'll be back next week with more unfiltered friend talk right here on A Holistic Dose.
We'll see you next time.